So, thank you for joining us again for another installment of our training series on setting up articulated qualifications. This is just saying a fancy way of saying qualifications that have more than one module or course involved in the study for the learner. This is part 3 or step 3, part 1, where we're going to look at a particular learning program's application setup. So the thinking behind this is that learners need to get into your particular program, and what kind of data would you like to collect from them when they are attempting to access your program. So you want to collect this first before you allow them into the program. And also what other blocks or types of access would you like to have for them during their application flow. So we're going to start again by going to qualifications. We then will look at our learning program that we were busy with, and we will configure it. And now, having already gone through detail in step 1, and we dealt with campuses and curriculum in step 2, in terms of application setup, we're now going to look at settings, costs, and wizards. I'll mention what entry requirements are, but you don't have to have that set up. Okay, so starting with the application setup, settings, the first line says show this qualification on the apply page. So what this is for your institution, by default, when you have Student Manager running, you're able to create an online prospectus page, which will allow potential learners who want to study at your institution to go through to your /apply page and be able to read through information about the course and then start the application process. So what this is saying is, do you want this qualification or learning program to appear on that page at all? So for now, it's yes. Because we are looking at actually starting a program that can be accessed online, we want that to be selected. Allow online applications, we select this. If it's not selected and you have an open intake, we'll cover intakes at a later stage. What will happen is, if someone can apply for something, it will appear in green and say contact us if that is not selected. If it is selected, there'll be a little button for them to start the application. Also, if nothing is currently open for that particular learning program or qualification, orange pill or text will appear which will say applications closed. So there's nothing currently open for that program. Okay, depending on your environment or your setup, you may want to have them go directly from the applications process, which we'd call the data collection, the personal data collection process, and into registration. So registration is where they select the courses that they'd like to study. This allows them to then go in, select the courses, and then be presented with an amount that says, okay, you now owe the institution X amount because accumulatively, by selecting those modules, this is how much you owe. So that's what that is for. So you allow them to select their courses, and then staff will take over after that. Another option is, depending on your setup, it may be a requirement that a learner should select all available modules at the time of applying and continuing to register. So if you select this, it will automatically select everything that's in there. You don't have to do this. It's only where you want some form of automation. If you needed to do this because it's a single, like a short course, we have sort of configured this to work together in our short courses section. That's part of a different series for setting up shorter learning programs. But for our purposes, the main things to allow online applications would be to show it on the apply page and to allow online applications. if you deselect both of these, they won't show on externally, but internally your staff would still be able to capture details against a given learning program. So we're just going to select that. Okay, costs. So for your environment, you may be able to have the option for setting up an admin fee. So there may be an admin processing fee for the application. So you can set that up, and you may want to collect a deposit. So if you know those values, you're able to fill that in. So for example, I may say that we have 150 unit or in my currency admin fee, and a deposit is 50 units. Okay, let's just make this reasonable and say it's 5 units, and that's 50 units. Okay, so now we've dealt with our settings, our costs. I'm going to mention entry requirements, but I won't go into it. In the South African learning context, what we have is most higher education institutions have a point scoring system. You can configure this in our settings section, and then link custom ranges for points and subjects under entry requirements. So what this does is when somebody leaves their high school or their junior education or secondary education, you can say that, okay, for studying maths on this level, we'll award you these points if you score within X% to X%. So if you score between 50 and 60%, we'll give you 3 points towards your points calculation. This allows you to automate stuff where they can fill in their marks, and then if you have something where you enter according to points, the system will automatically let them know how the points calculation works and what the mark will be. So what you can do is set it up like this in instance, but it's not necessary for you to do it if you don't have that kind of setup in your environment. So for that reason, I'm going to leave this out. It will be part of a different how-to video or help document on our site. What we want to focus on for the remainder of this video is setting up a wizard. So I'm going to ignore what's here, and I just want you to understand the purpose and the setup of a wizard. So when you add a wizard, what you are adding is a method of collecting data, and you're sort of creating a standard application form. So think of it as your institution having a paper-based system, and it may be, let's say it's the 2019 version of your application form. So that's basically what you're creating, an electronic version of your 2019 application form. So let's just call this 2019 standard data. All right. Oh, we're not going to automatically generate a student number. That's something else. You may not need it for your environment. So when you add the wizard, you need to give it a name. So we're going to call it 2019 student data. Then a message to give them some kind of direction for at the end of the application process. So if they're successful in the application process, this page will display and this text will display. So I'm just going to say thank you for applying. We look forward to continuing our your learning journey with us. One of our support team will make contact with you within the next 48 hours. Okay. So it just gives them direction at the end of the application process. So now we're going to go through what's actually now happened. So we've created this data collection form. Now we need to look at how to configure this. So the first thing we want you to notice is by default we create two for you because in general those are the most commonly used. So the first one is a standard one, which is basic information. So our system requires a name, surname, and an email address in order to communicate with the learner. So when you need to tell them this is what's going on in the process, that is what's required. Their first name, last name, and their email address. There's a method for standardizing stuff, but this is the most important, is being able to send them notifications, which we do via email, and it's a lot easier to work that way. So because of that, you can't actually edit anything on this page in terms of what can be collected or captured. What you can do is edit some of the settings on this page. Right, so all of the pages are standard. We're going to go into detail in our next video. We'll go into a lot more detail about the wizard. This is just a brief overview and introduction so that you have an idea of what you need to prepare for when you go into the next video. So some of the things that you may need is, if you don't have the information, you may need to get in contact with someone who does. You need to know what data what's the most important data that needs to be collected from your potential applicants, which staff need to be notified that the data has been entered, and you need to understand what your workflow is in terms of the applications process. So some institutions have something where certain data will be collected, and then at a given point, because stuff is going to be uploaded, they'll need certain staff to review. Okay? And because of this flow, you can then configure this in any way that you'd like to match up with your current workflow. So just so that you're aware, you have a heading section where you can give the person some kind of direction about the data that will be collected on the page. You're able to send them an email once they completed a given step. After a review has been conducted, you can automate an email that has been that needs to be sent, and there's terms and conditions which you can say, for example, we'll be collecting this data from you, we won't use it for anything other than academic related issues. So that's just a brief overview of what happens there. The next part is you're able to add a reviewer. So this person will stop the process from continuing because they'll review stuff and then allow it to continue. Or you can just allow people to be notified by email that somebody has passed a given step, and you'd add a notification recipient. So I just want to stop there, and then in our next video we'll actually go in depth into a wizard. So just to summarize, what we've covered here is understanding that there's settings in terms of applications. So there's you need to set up that it is accessible or not accessible for somebody externally. The next part is if you have any costs that are dealt with during the application process, you can fill those in here as well. We summarized what goes into entry requirements, and we began a brief introduction into what actually happens with an application wizard. In our next video, we'll go in depth into application wizards. Once we've covered an application wizard in depth, we'll then move on to setting up an intake, because once you have an intake, you then can allow somebody to access your program by going online and viewing your applications page, and then they can start an application. Okay, thank you again for coming with us thus far. I hope that we will get to see you in our next video, where we actually cover working with this wizard, because it's quite an important thing, and setting up and standardizing the type of data that you'd like to collect as part of your application process, or internally for potential students, the type of data you'd like to have on hand for them as a standard method of data capture. Thank you, and I hope to have you access the next video in the series.